Kind father and mother, my most humble duty remembered to you, hoping in God of your good health, as I myself am at the making thereof. This is to let you understand that I, you child, am in a most heavy case by reason of the country, which is such that it causeth much sickness, such as the scurvy and the bloody flux and divers other diseases, which maketh the body very poor and weak.
Although white men had far more opportunities than others, they were still limited depending on how much property they owned, where they lived, and when they lived. For example, Richard Frethorn was a young, white Englishman who was an indentured servant. He arrived at Jamestown, Virginia in 1623, which was also the time of the New World. His letter depicted how the New World was harsh due to many epidemic diseases. He also frequently complained about the lack of food, shelter, and recent Native American attacks. In this letter, Frethorn begged his parents to help him by taking him out of his misery. This just proves that he wasn't wealthy and was part of the lower class, even though his roots are white. The year in which Frethorn served as an indentured servant was a huge contributor to the minimal opportunities he had. At this time, he experienced the hardships of early English settlement, which were far worse than the year of 1663. George Alsop's letter, written in 1663, contradicted the problems of life as an indentured servant Frethorn experienced. Alsop explained that being an indentured servant was much easier in Maryland in the 1660s. They enjoyed many more privileges, such as property after their term is done or a break, and overall lived an easier life than those who weren't indentured servants. He said,
In short, touching the servants of this province, they live well in the time of their service, and by their restrainment in that time, they are made capable of living much better when they come to be free.
Therefore, it is proven that white men had far more opportunities than others, but it depended on where they lived and when they lived.
Another opportunity that was only available to white men for a very long time was being able to own land. Historians like to describe these landowners as lawyers, lawmakers, and occupations that upper-class men would have. Not any kind of landowners, but they were plantation owners of tobacco. In The Symbolic World of the Tobacco Planter, Breen argues that there was various reasons why people owned plantations as such. He describes it being a source of colonial prosperity, saying that there is literal growth from within. Owning a tobacco plantation in the 18th century established a social identity to many of these men. Tobacco was often seen as the staple of Virginia and one that should not be taken for granted because of its production. This opportunity was very close off because people of color were not worthy enough of owning any kind of land. Instead of having the opportunity of owning land, people of color and even women had the opportunity to work in these tobacco plantations for labor. Only people who did own land was white men. They did not want others to obtain a social identity and grow in the business aspect to become richer than they were because that could have possibly happened if they had every right to do so. Many Virginia planters insisted on being present at every step of the process due to tobacco's production and the highly competitive growers surrounding one another. The production of tobacco was to be taken extremely seriously, and the majority of a planter's time was spent on their plantation being accompanied by family, servants, and slaves. There was no dead season in growing tobacco, and because of that, it helped the planters' sense of time and the way they acted with their behavior throughout the entire year. Also, since there was no dead season, it made it a lot more challenging for all planters because there was really no time to relax or slack off. If a planter was well known for their tobacco, others would name them a crop master. This would give planters a recognition, and this was one of the crucial reasons as to why men would grow tobacco, to get a sense of identity. George Washington was also a plantation owner himself and strongly agreed with the saying that said the quality of a man's tobacco is a measure of the man. This portrayed in their social ranking, and the opportunity of owning land was limited to mainly white men, and this caused for anyone else to not have a social identity.
America, the land of opportunity. Yes, there is many opportunities for white men in America, but for women, is there any hope? Only slightly. Though some women may gain land from their husbands, it does not mean that they are 100% equal to men. Kathleen Brown's article, The Anglo-Algonquian Gender Frontier, explains the difference between tribal genders and colonial genders in the 17th century. The natives, for instance, had more women, and these women did the agricultural process. In English culture, the men did the farming, and this seemed effeminate in the eyes of the Algonquians. The men of the tribes were hunters and leaders, often signifying the taking of life, whereas the women were life givers, doing the farming and raising of children. The men in English culture were the providers, while the women took care of the household chores and child raising. The women in the tribes had more power than those English women. One similarity was that females were supposed to be abstinent in both cultures until marriage. These show that the overall men have all the opportunity, whereas the women, at least in the English culture, did not. Also, more opportunity unfolded for the smart colonial people due to the expansion west. The Manifest Destiny articles from John L. O'Sullivan and William H. Wharton explain how opportunity during the years 1836 and 1839 were rising for white men. O'Sullivan talks of America believing it is its right to expand westward. This kind of document makes Americans feel entitled to the West, and this Manifest Destiny idea made many Americans want to expand. This led to more people moving west due to the opportunities that had arose out of the idea of Manifest Destiny. William H. Wharton makes people believe that the Texas revolt is necessary because Mexicans do not have the right to infiltrate the state due to the fact that Texas already acts like an American state. This is similar to how Germany infiltrated Poland in World War II because most of the population was German. We learn from history that this is not the case for many. So many people died from the journey west and did not gain opportunities that were offered, although many who took advantage of the situation were able to thrive. An example would be from those selling tools during the gold rush who were able to profit, but those who were mining for gold ended up penniless.
Since their first arrival to the New World, they had taken opportunity from the Native Americans. Due to diseases brought by whites like smallpox, measles, and yellow fever, Native Americans quickly became sick and millions died. Native Americans not only received these diseases from future Americans, but people from Spain and France that ventured to the New World who also spread new diseases. These people who stayed are the predecessors to the men who would create the United States, giving them the opportunity taken away from the Native Americans by deadly diseases. By dropping their population numbers, experts saying up to 80 to 95% of natives died. It made for natives to be second-hand citizens, to be pushed around, forced out of homelands, and to be seen as savages. The natives would then have to learn to live in a new world on their old lands to only be witnesses to the gaining opportunities of the white man.
These are the reasons for believing America is not a land of opportunity. Thank you.